Welcome to this session about VSCode for ABL application. My name is Gilles Querret. I work for Riverside Software. In fact, I am the of Riverside Software, company which is based in France. So working mostly with OpenEdge since 15 years and also with a specialty with Java. And we focused on build automation, continuous integration, source code analysis for the OpenEdge platform. So probably many of you are already using some of our tools like PCT or the OpenEdge plugin for SonarQube, which is doing code analysis for ABL. So this session is about VSCode. So back to the beginning, VSCode is a code editor or an IDE which is developed by Microsoft for Windows, Linux, and macOS. So the project was started in 2013 approximately, and the first real version, public version, was released in 2015 with Eric Gamma as a technical lead. So Eric Gamma is one of the guys from the Gang of Four, so the four guys who wrote the design patterns book, so a very interesting book. If you are working with object-oriented concept, you absolutely should read this book. So VSCode is there to offer advanced code editing features such as syntax highlighting, code completion, code refactoring, very good integration with Git, support for debuggers, and all of that for a lot of programming languages. So it is open source. This is part of the new Microsoft strategy, which is about going open source a lot of products. Also, it's really open because they developed VSCode for Linux and macOS, so they were not close to Windows. So it can be easily customized, and there are a couple, you will be able to find a couple themes, extensions, custom keyboard shortcuts provided by the community. And it became widely popular, and this is a result of a Stack Overflow developer survey with a result from 2021 and 2022 to the question, which developmental environment did you use in the last year, and which one do you want to work with in the coming year? So over time, VSCode, VSCode is currently at a bit more than 70%, which makes it extremely popular among the developer community. So it was possible to provide multiple answers. This is why that doesn't sum up to 100%, but technically VSCode is really the leading IDE for the developer community. So this is the question was asked to the Stack Overflow crowd. So maybe if you ask the same question to the OpenEdge community, you wouldn't have exactly the same results. However, the VS Code is extremely popular, and one of the reasons is that it's possible to have support for a lot of languages. And this is what makes it extremely popular. You can find support, for example, for Python, or for C or C++, or ESLint, or C#. So there are support for approximately, if you look for extensions for programming languages, you will find approximately 6,000 results, meaning that doesn't mean that 6,000 languages are supported in VS Code, because there are some duplicates. You have an example here for Python, where you have the official Microsoft Python plugin, and another one for Pylons, which is another plugin. So there are some duplicates, but a lot of languages are available in VS Code. This means that from the same tool, you can work with your C code, your C++ code, your Java code, your JavaScript code within the same environment. So, and the question can be why so many languages are available to VS Code. I mean, for example, Eclipse is open source. Eclipse is there since 20 years probably, probably even more. And the number of programming languages that are supported there is quite limited. This is mainly Java, C, C++, and a few other languages. You have JavaScript, but it's quite limited while it is open. And the reason why so many languages are supported in VSCode is because Microsoft introduced the language server protocol. So the thing is that if you want to add support to any IDE, you have to write the glue between the language and integrate that directly into the IDE. So you have to use the API that the IDE is providing in order to support the language. So if you want to provide syntax highlight or code completion, you have to use the API provided by the code editor, and you have to repeat that again for every code editor. So the idea of Microsoft was to say, we're going to introduce a new protocol that you just have to implement it, and then the IDE will be able to start your language server, and using this specific protocol, we will support all the features that you provide in the language server. So there is a quite long specification of entry points saying, I've modified something in the source code, or I would like to get code completion at this position in the source code, or please compile the code and give me the diagnostics, and everything. You have to provide the implementation for that for your language. So the idea is to just bind everything into a single language server, so that your IDE, instead of talking directly, your plugin, instead of talking directly to the IDE, you implement a protocol, and the IDE will be using the outcome. So here, for example, just an example of what can happen. The developer opens a document in VS Code, then a notification will be sent. Does that work? Yes, the notification will be sent by the IDE to say the user or the developer opened a text document. This is the URI of the document. Here is the location on disk or on the network of this specific file. So then you modify the document, introduce a new statement. Every time you do a modification, notifications are sent to say, oh, something has changed. So maybe you will have to recompute the document outline, the list of variables that are available in the specific context. So here, you did change, notifications are being sent. And in turn, the server can say, oh, there is something wrong in what you wrote. So I will publish a diagnostic. There is, for example, a warning at this line or a compilation error at this line. So it is then the duty of the IDE to display that in the developer environment. But here, the language server doesn't know anything about the client side. So the client can be VS Code. This is mainly developed for VS Code at the beginning, but there are other clients. And during this session, we will see other clients consuming the language server for ABL. So here, some additional example of entry points. So you want to go to the definition. For example, you are using a variable. You want to go to the definition of this variable just to see what kind of options were defined. No undo, for example, or extend for ABL. So you just use the text document definition entry point. You get the response from the language server. And then, for example, you close the document. So you have to maintain, for example, if you have to free some memory, you can use this git close entry point. So here, the idea is also to have one language server per language. So if you have Java code in your application and ABL code in your application, you will have two separate processes being started by the development tool, and depending on the file type that you are working with, you will talk directly to the Java language server or to the other one. So there is absolutely no limit in terms of language that are supported. You just have to implement the interface. So here, just a question. How many people did attend the ABL, VSCode for ABL session last year at the Poet Summit? Okay, so not too many. So last year, this session was presented, and the emoji was not exactly the same, because there was no language server for ABL, or at least nothing which was public. So I was able to do a small demo. However, that was a completely private language server. It was absolutely not ready to be delivered to customers or even to beta testers. The thing is that today, the ABL language server is available. So you will be able, at the end of this session, you will be able to install the VSCode plugin for ABL and start doing some code using this new language server. So why did we start working on the language server? So we have been working on build automation since years. So working with Ant and PCT in order to make sure that it's possible to compile your entire application in a repeatable way. We wanted to make sure that whenever you commit source code in the code repository, you can build it again and again and again using exactly the same procedure and without having anybody doing any manual action. We wanted to automate absolutely everything. So we also, we then started working on continuous deployment too, and starting working on code analysis. So probably some of you are using the OpenEdge plugin for SonarQube. Some of you are using the Developer Studio for plugin for SonarQube, which allows you to detect some code smells, bad practices, or bugs, potential bugs in your source code directly in Developer Studio, or using SonarQube, which is a solution provided by SonarSource, a Swiss company, which does code analysis for lots of languages. So we wanted to provide entry points and gather all those functionality in a VSCode plugin by making sure that it's possible to have projects in VSCode that would be built automatically with a background process, so reusing what has been done with Ant and PCT, and also be able to execute the code analysis part in VSCode, and then the cherry on the cupcake by providing some go-to definition, online help for the ABL language. So just another question, how many of you are using Developer Studio? And do you feel it's a bit heavy or it's too long to start? Or sure, everybody can. It's usual. So, enough talk. I would like to go directly to the demonstration. So, let's go to this part. Let's go here. Where is my cursor? Okay. So, give me 1 second here. I'm running macOS on this MacBook. Unfortunately, the language server and the ABL session have to run on the same machine. It's not possible to use a network connection, and as there is no ABL implementation for macOS, I'm going to switch to Windows in order to start VS Code, so everything will be done on Windows. Let's start that. This is a sample project. Oh, yes, I forgot to do that. I will HDMI. Okay. This is not, yes. Duplicate. Here it is. That was tested. It was faster yesterday. Okay, so I'm going to use a sample project. It's a very light project. I will start VSCode. You can start it using the code command line with dot to specify, please open the current directory as a root of the OpenEdge project. So we start VSCode. So it's approximately 100 times faster than starting PDSOE, probably. So first, I would like to show something. Here, let's get there. The VSCode plugin is already installed on this machine, but the requirements for running the VSCode plugin is first to have VSCode. Just install the most recent version. There are auto-updates, so you will always be on the latest version. Then you have to install ABL for sure. You can install any version of ABL, or any version. This is currently tested with 11.7, 12.2, 12.5, and 12.6 ESAP version. The plan is to support recent version, and we don't want to have any link between the VSCode plugin and the OpenEdge version. So it's technically possible to use the VSCode plugin with 11.7 that will be supported. We want to make sure that you can upgrade to any version of the VSCode plugin while still using old version of OpenEdge. So you are not stuck with old development tools just because you are using OpenEdge 11.7. So what you have to do, you have to configure the OpenEdge runtimes on the machine. So it's very simple. This is a VSCode configuration. So you just specify the name of the version and specify the path of the OpenEdge installation. So this is only what you have to configure. One more requirement if you are using OpenEdge 11.7, you need Java version 11, Java 1.8. There is no reason to use Java 1.8 anymore. This is really deprecated. You should switch at least to Java 11, maybe even to Java 17, but this is currently tested with Java 11. Then your project need one additional file in the root directory, and this file is, one more thing, just about the plugin. You just go to the marketplace. The marketplace is available from here. You specify, for example, Riverside. That will you will find this plugin. There are multiple OpenEdge ABL plugins available on the marketplace. There is only one with a blue check mark, just because this is validated that the publisher is Riverside Software. This is the only one. It's the current plugin. This implementation is based on the Christophe Kamikaze, who is the current maintainer of the old VSCode plugin. So there was almost nothing in common as of today, just because all the logic went from the JavaScript or TypeScript part. It went directly to the language server. So only the skeleton is common today. So. Here, back to the project, you need to specify a configuration file, which is more or less the same as a .project in PDSOE. This is where you specify the project name, the build path, so meaning the source directories, the pro path of your application, and then the list of database connection. Is it large enough for everybody to read at the back of the room? Is that okay? Yes? So, yep. Switch to white. View, no, color theme, white, here. Is that better? Yes. Oh, excellent. Yeah. Everything goes into dark mode, and I'm starting to get used to the dark mode, but usually I'm using light. Yes, Peter?
The build directory, is that automatically added into profile, or you have to check this in profile here now?
I will explain all the entries in there. So, here.
Sorry, can you repeat the question, Gilles?
So that was about the build question, was about the build path, but this is something I'm going to explain in the next minutes. So first thing, for every project you have to define a name and a version number. So this is currently just for information, but in the future that will be used for dependency management. So that will be used to say, I would like to depend on this project in this specific version. So dependencies will be injected directly into the ProPath. So this is currently not available. That will be used in the future, and I wanted to make sure that information is already present. So character sets, we can skip that. Something important is the OpenEdge version of the project. So this project is running OpenEdge 12.2. This means that everything will be compiled using this version of the compiler. You can have multiple projects in your workspace, one in 11.7, one in 12.2. That's absolutely not a problem. And you can switch a given project from one version to another one, recompile everything, and that will work immediately out of the box. Then graphical mode, do you want to use TTY or GUI, so underscore progress or ProRin 32 or not for your application. Extra parameters, this is something to add additional options. What is important is a build path. So the build path can have two types. There are two different entries. One is a source directory. So a source directory will be injected in the ProPath of your session, and also every changes in any .p or .w or .i will be monitored, so that every time you modify something, that will be compiled on the fly. And this is not only for modifications coming from VSCode, but even if you modify the source using a notepad outside of VSCode, that will be monitored and recompiled immediately. So the second type is ProPath. So this is, you just add that to the ProPath, but you don't do any monitoring. So if you change anything in a directory, here we are only using PL files. So there are no changes within the PL file, but that can be a directory. We just don't monitor what's happening there. So if you modify, I don't know, a dependency, you modify something, you will have to manually refresh the build process or restart the language server to say something has changed. This is added in the ProPath in this specific order, so you have to be careful where you add things in this list. Everything is always built in a build directory. If you don't specify this option, this goes into the source directory by itself, so the .r will be standing next to the .p or .cls. You can start multiple threads for the compilation process. So what we're going to see is for a very small application, starting one thread is enough. If you have 20 or 50 files, as in this application, everything is compiled in a couple seconds. When you have an application which is made out of, I don't know, 1,000 files or 10,000 files, it can take a lot longer to compile everything and then to parse the XREF, extract information, display the diagnostics, provide them back to VSCode. So it's possible to start to say, I would like to start 4 threads, So you just do that. You will have 4 probe stations started in the background, and that will, everything will be compiled, spread to the 4 threads. So it will be probably 4 times faster, especially given that now we have multiple cores and machines. So it is unusual to have a single core nowadays. Usually you have 16 or 20 cores. This is really usual on a developer machine. So just use them. As you can use the power of your machine. So then database connection. All Progress applications need a database connection. Here, you have to provide the connection name, the connection string, and then the dump file and aliases. So the connection string, this is used by the background session to compile your code. The fastest way here to compile anything is by using a read-only local connection. This is the fastest way. I've done tests since years, especially here for the build automation part. It's always faster to use a read-only connection into a local directory compared to anything else. And on top of that, you can have one database which is being used by 4 threads or 8 threads or any number of threads without having to start a database broker. You just don't need anything. You don't have to allocate a port number, which is always a pain, because if you allocate a port number, you need to specify the port number. So then you start a second VSCode instance with the same project, and you're stuck because of duplicate ports. So use just read-only connection, recreate the database on the fly. You can execute ent to connect to create the database. Creating a new database from scratch, even if there are hundreds of or thousands of tables, that shouldn't take more than 1 minute. And you usually do that once when you create the project or when you refresh the project because there were changes in the Git repository, database changes in the Git repository. Otherwise, you do that once in a while. So then you can also have profiles. Additional profile is something which is extremely important because your ERP system, for example, you work with it in 12.2, for example, but you want to test the application using 12.6, the ASAP version. So you just want to directly switch from the 12.2 compiler to the 12.6 compiler just to see how the application behaves. So it's very easy to do that. You can define additional profiles, so you inherit from any other profile. So here we just inherit from the default profile, and we override some value. So here, this is not the OpenEdge version that we override. This is a graphical mode. So the graphical mode was set to false, but here we are on Windows. So by default, it's a Unix project. Here we are on Windows. I want to compile everything using ProWin and end up with R code, which is compiled for GUI. So it is exactly the same project, and using a simple shortcut, I just switch a project to a different profile. It will provide me with a list of profiles for this project, which are default and GUI mode, and then the language server will be restarted with different options or different options on the command line, a different executable, different database connection, whatever you want. So, and everything can be stored in the repository. So this means that you can share that with your colleagues. You just commit everything to the Git repo, and you have multiple versions available, multiple profiles for developers, for example, for remote developers and for local developers. One profile for 12.2, one for 12.5, one for 11.7, one with a dependency on an additional module and one without this dependency. So you can override all the properties, the build path, build directories, the number of threads, the database connection, everything can be overridden, and you keep track because you commit that to the Git repo, so you keep track of all the changes and all the configuration in a single location, so in this JSON file. Usually, there are absolutely no machine-specific information in this file. So for example, here you can notice you can use a DLC variable. So whatever the OpenEdge version and whatever the, if it's a Unix or Windows machine, that will be resolved correctly depending on your environment. So you should, as usual, don't provide machine-specific information in something which is shared in Git. So let's go with the next step. So also one thing, if you are already using PDSOE, there is currently no way to import the configuration file or to transform them into an OpenEdge project.json. That will probably come in the future because this is not really complex, just about converting the .project, importing the database connection, and generate an OpenEdge project.json. There is already an issue which is created on the GitHub project page that probably will get implemented, but if anybody from Progress, for example, would like to do that, it would be a pleasure. Why not?
I have a question.
Sure.
How do you get the first version of OpenEdge-project.json? So if I start a new folder, I'm going to start a new project, how do I get the very first OpenEdge-project?
Which OpenEdge?
Well, this configuration, this JSON file, I want to create a new project, I'm going to put a new.
Okay, so you just drop the file, and you will have to insert some properties. There are some code completion, for example. Here there is a procedure node, which is an array here. There is some code completion here. This accepts objects. The object is, for example, the name of the procedure, which is foo_bar.p, and the other attribute is mode. And you also have code completion on the configuration file. So this is documented on the GitHub project page, but there is also code completion available here. If you write something wrong, like here, this is written, there are some quibbles here, so you know that something is wrong. Code completion is there. Yes?
On the extension, on the page of the extension, there's a pretty comprehensive example.
Yes.
Copy straight away.
So here, this is also the documentation, part of the documentation of the project. So here you have the project configuration. There is an example with comments. So it's not very difficult to write the configuration file. So back to the project by itself. Let's open.
Gilles?
Yes.
We have an online question talking
Sure.
about the old VSCode ABL plugin that could work with the remote secure shell to build and run on Linux. Do you have plans to support that? To be
Yes, the question is about supporting remote session on Linux. That will be answered at the end of the session with more details. So here, this is, we just opened a sample procedure. So as soon as you start a .p, .w, .cls, the language server is started. So a process will be there. So we can see here in the log output that we started a Java process. So this is done, as soon as you open a .p, and you will find the log output in this section. So in the output here, you go to the language server, and we can see some information specifically about the progress version, where which source directories are being configured, where do we build, what is a PCT directory, which OpenEdge process is being started. So just check for error messages in this section. This is where you will see, oh, something is not correctly configured, or this is working as expected. So as soon as we start the project, the the source directories are monitored, so we keep track of the list of procedures .p.w. If there is no R code, we immediately compile them, and then we will parse the xref in order to generate dependency information, specifically, for example, for include files or for classes. So we extract information from the R code of classes to have the list of methods, properties, variables, and so on. We also need information from include files. This include file is used in this file. So if I modify the include file, then I will have to recompile a set of .p.w. So everything is done in the background. So here you have information about what is compiled. You have the list here. I will just clean the log output so that we can see here what's happening. You can see that there is a this is a very simple procedure. There are a few things that you can expect from any IDE. So here, if we click onto the go to definition, we go directly onto the include file, which is searched into in the ProPath. We have things here. If we do a modification and say message hello, this include file is being used by the main procedure, so if we save immediately, we recompile debugger02.p because it is referenced, referencing the .i file, and the compilation is successful. So let's introduce an error compilation issue. Save. Here, this is highlighted in red. We have a compilation error, compilation failed. We can see that here at the first line, we have some red things, which means there is a compilation issue. We go back, fix the compilation, and this is now working as expected. So be able to navigate with an include file. This is a basic functionality of an IDE. Yes, you have a quick question?
Yeah, with dependencies, is it just includes or are they class-based, dependencies?
So dependencies, is that only include or is that also about classes? So for example, if I go to the definition, this is a simple object definition. What I can do, and here let's do it this way, we will split the display here. So this simple is using method 1. I will just modify, for example, the signature of method 1. So introduce YYY as character, for example, and then this is immediately triggered. We know that something is wrong within this file. So here we can do that, and this is now back to normal. We can also do something. No, this is Control P. I load callback. This is an interface of a method, an interface. If I add a new public void foobar, okay, that should be okay here. We can have a look. This is being used in one of those classes. I don't know which one. Yes, in this one, there is now a compilation issue, so it knows the dependency. Everything is done by reading the R code, so we have the exact dependency tree within your project. So we know exactly what methods are being used, what is a parent, what are the children, and so on. So back to here. And we are back to normal. What I've also said is that source directories are monitored. This means that even if you modify the content of the source directory with another tool, this is immediately recompiled. And the use case, the extremely common use case, is that you are using Git. Who is using Git? You should use Git. Yes, excellent. So if you don't use Git, you should. So Git, branches, this is a basic of Git. So every time you want to work on something different, you should switch to a different branch. So you switch to a branch, and what you expect is that what is changed in this branch is immediately recompiled. So this is exactly what happened, which is made possible by having the language server monitor the source directories. So here, within VSCode, it's possible to very easily switch branches. So here I'm on the master branch. I will switch to, yes, stash and checkout. Stash, okay. Let's do that. And a few files were changed. So here, yes, it tried to apply some my stash, which doesn't work, but immediately I know that some files have been modified, then this is immediately recompiled. So as soon as you switch to another branch, this is done. I will switch back again. Let me just, I will git restore. I don't use Git VSCode as a Git client, so I'm always going back to the command line, git restore dot git status. Yes, everything is now clean. So this is branch 1. I switch to branch 2, for example. Poof, this is triggered. And in a couple seconds, everything is recompiled. You don't have to wait for a full build. This is done directly. So I know that this is a small project. I swear that this also works on larger projects. And anyway, if that doesn't work as fast as you would expect, feel free to report issues, and I just hope that that will be fixed. Yes? 5 minutes. 5 minutes? Really? Yes.
Is the REST adapter supported?
So, one thing, the REST adapter, is a REST adapter supported? Currently, this is only about code editing. So there is no support for GUI, for example. So if you want to modify GUI, this is not supported. The REST adapter, there is no specific support for that. We are focusing on code development. So, a few additional things. I'm afraid I was a bit too slow, but so there is no GUI here, but you can open file with the app builder. So instead of re-implementing everything, so if you have some screen, you just open it. You can do modification within the triggers, but if you want to modify the outline of the browse, widgets, and so on, you will have to open the app builder. So also there is no data dictionary, for example. However, you can go to Open Data Dictionary here, and here you have access, very fast access to that. So it is not meant to replace everything. It is not meant to replace entirely Developer Studio or to replace the app builder. This is only about code editing. Focus on that. Here, let's go to something else. There are a few things that you can do that are available. So you have some online help, which is available. You also have some sort of code completion, which is a part which is currently not perfect. I have to admit that if I would have to pay for the plugin as of today, I probably wouldn't pay for the code completion as it is today. However, that will be improved in the future, and definitely that will be working in the coming months. I will just provide some additional information because this is the end of the session. So, the plugin is available for free on the marketplace. So the core of the plugin, so the TypeScript code, is open source. The language server is not open source. Then it is free. There will be paid extensions. At some point, I have to pay for the builds. There will be paid extensions, probably around code refactoring and advanced features, but the core will remain open source and free. I want to make sure that it's possible to use the plugin for free for if you have simple needs. There was absolutely no way I could charge, Riverside could charge for that. Then there is also support for the debugger. It is possible to start the debugger adapter protocol is also implemented. So you can start session using the debugger. You have views of variables. You can modify content of variables. You can go into any procedure, go into include files. This is working in a very, very easy way. There are also, what did I want to say? There was one point, but I can't remember it. I will just keep 1 or 2 minutes for questions.
Linux, is it working on?
Oh, yes, Linux. So technically, this is running, here the demo has been done on Windows. If you want to use it on Linux, you can use it on Linux. There is absolutely no problem. You can also do remote development. So by starting a VSCode server, on a Linux server, and attaching a web browser to the remote session. So you can do remote development with HTTP. So your web browser is used to do some code editing on a remote machine, which can sit anywhere in the world. And it's apart from macOS, where you have to use Docker or virtual machine, everything is supported. So you can use it on Linux. Another question? Yes, Peter? Oh.
In the roadmap session yesterday that Rob did, there was talk of a language server. How do they?
So the question is about the language server, which was presented during the roadmap session. I wish I could answer this question. I don't have an answer. I would be happy to, maybe if there is anybody from Progress, they could answer that or do that during this evening, but I don't have an answer right now. Carl, you had a question?
The Linux, will it also work over SSH?
Will that work over SSH, meaning the source directories over SSH, or?
No, I mean running VSCode on a Windows machine and using SSH to a Linux where the project is.
If VSCode is able to do that, then, no, not sure. I'm not sure, because the language server, that would have to be implemented at the language server level. So probably, I would say probably no right now. Maybe in the future.
Okay, thank you.
Other question? Yes?
So does it have all the fine references support or like the content assistance with respect to database and all stuff?
So content assist for?
The database fields or like the content assistance with respect to editor features and
yes, absolutely. Yes. So what is currently implemented in the content assist engine? There are the list of database tables, database fields with descriptions. So you also have, if you hover the cursor over database fields, you have the description. Also methods, objects, variable, parameters. This is what is meant to be included in the content assist. So as of today, I would say sometimes, and in many cases, it doesn't display the right thing as a first choice. This is where some adjustments have to be done, but technically the information is available at the language server level. So it contains every information about coming from objects, hierarchy, methods, and so on. It's just not always presented in the best way.
Okay, time is up.
Okay, so I will be available after this session. I will be there during the evening. I had a lot more to present. I'm afraid I talked too much or not quick enough. There was also a demo about using VI, using the language server. So if you are a TTY guy and you have to use Linux or even older machine, you can use VI in TTY and use a language server in order to have multiple buffers, content assist directly in your TTY session. This is extremely fun. So if some people would like to see that, I would be happy to do a short demo. Good. Thank you.